As soon as the team of the medical and laboratory research had declared these amazing findings, the media began to pay attention to this unprecedented medical discovery. London Radio was the first station to transmit and broadcast this news. Here is a part of what was transmitted, as declared by the research team.
Reading and hearing about the enormous cry raised by the humane scholar Muhammad Amin Sheikhu, signs spread all over the streets calling the Syrian people to check the sources of the meat they eat and the way in which the animals were slaughtered. Our newswoman in Damascus, Salwa al-Ustuwani, saw these signs and sent us the following message.
These words were written on large notices covering the streets and published through tapes so as to spread the news of a medical discovery based on God's wisdom. The Damascene scholar Muhammad Amin Sheikhu was the first to draw attention to the situation as modern life began to diminish certain characteristics of Islam. His medical discovery concerns the way of slaughtering animals, which can be eaten after pronouncing the statement, Allah is greater, at the moment of slaughtering.
A French station has transmitted the findings of this discovery in French to the countries of the European Union. This caused the largest center for chicken slaughtering in the French city of Toulouse to take up these findings and employ a man to pronounce the name of Allah over each carcass to be slaughtered there.
The news of this exciting discovery spread through all news agencies, newspapers, as well as local, Arabic, and international magazines. In addition, Arabic and international satellite stations had interviews with Abdul Qadir al-Dairani and the members of the medical team, which shed further light on their findings. The researchers published their results in a book dedicated to Muhammad Amin Sheikhu, under the title of Allah is Greater, Be Kind to Animals. A man may ask, how can an abstract group of words cause a tangible effect that is both noticeable and practical? What is the secret hidden beyond the words, Allah is greater, so that it makes the meat of carcasses sterilized and free of blood? I say, in our world, when the Almighty God offered His trust to all spirits, as the noble Quran indicates when it says, we offered the trust to the heavens, earth and mountains, and they refused to bear it. Why did they refuse? For they feared it. They feared to fail, and in the fire of sorrow, regret, and loss would flame inside them. Man bore it, he said. O Provider, it is mine. At that time, the universe and all the creatures in it accepted to be subject and servant to man, especially the cattle and birds, which chose to sacrifice their bodies for man, who had undertaken to bear the trust of God. So to be grateful for this great sacrifice, man should return charity for charity by pronouncing the name of his Provider loudly when slaughtering these animals, so as to give them a lift, elevating them from their spiritual worldly bliss to a more exalted and sublime one. The Almighty says in the Al-Hajj Surah, so as to pronounce the name of Allah over the animals which He has granted them.
Allahu Akbar.
In fact, when they put off their physical garment, their veil will be removed, and they will be abstract spirits, all of which are merely sounds, tastes, and feelings. They will understand the words, Allah is greater, in any language of the world. So, when pronouncing in the name of God, Allah is greater, their spirits will fly as a ray up to their Creator, full of happiness and everlasting delight, when looking at the Creator of beauty and origin. They will be pleased with His overwhelming generosity, and God will be pleased with them, for they have sacrificed their bodies for man, who is honored by Allah. They shake and tremble as they become flooded by the seas of bright light which He bestows on their bodies, making their blood flow out in plentiful amounts, and through which any damage is released from their bodies. God says, "Eat of that over which the name of Allah was pronounced."
Some people think that drugging the animal, electrocuting it, or making them unconscious by gas before slaughter protects them from convulsions, contractions, and the pain of dying. They claim that there are many ways of being kind to animals, whilst the Islamic method has no humanity.
بخصوص الذبح الإسلامي والذبح غير الإسلامي فقد درسه العالم ثورنتون.
Concerning the Islamic method of slaughter and the other ways which are not Islamic, the English scholar Thornton studied them and gave lectures on this subject at Cairo University in 1956. He said that the slaughter that is not Islamic increases the blood pressure of the carcass from 14 to 28, double the normal pressure. This tires the brain and torments the animal, although Westerners keep emphasizing that no concussion or contractions take place that may alienate the spirit and cause great anxiety for the animal. In contrast, the Islamic method relaxes the carcass and lessens the blood pressure from 14 to 0. Thereafter, all the blood is released from the carcass due to the body's natural contractions, and this results in the rose color.
Some Orientalists claim that the Islamic way of slaughter is inhumane. They provide the evidence of contractions and convulsions that the animal suffers when being killed. In fact, it's absolutely the opposite. If the Islamic method is performed correctly, it prevents the blood and air from reaching the brain. Thus, the animal becomes completely unconscious and loses all feeling. The convulsions that occur are but reflex actions which rid the carcass of all the blood it contains.
The effect of pronouncing the words, "In the name of God, Allah is greater," over the carcass is not confined to the purity and clarity of the meat. There is also an effect on changing the spiritual climate in the slaughterhouse from a state of misery and unhappiness to a state of pleasure and ease. This is what directors and workers in cattle and fowl slaughterhouses have confirmed.
Regarding slaughter, when performing it, we noticed that the amount of blood increases so much more when mentioning the words Allah is greater. Besides, when we do not pronounce the words, the animals are anxious and become agitated. They are much more comfortable when we pronounce the words.
They pronounce the words Allah is greater loudly over each carcass when they slaughter it. It was noticed that when doing this, the animal bleeds more and its meat is much lighter. In contrast, if these words are not said, the animal does not bleed enough and its flesh becomes rotten much more easily and in a much shorter period of time.
I was working in one of the largest slaughterhouses in Syria. When the findings of the research appeared, we soon began to apply them in the place where we work. We were surprised because we had faced a lot of trouble when driving the animals into the slaughter hall. After applying this act, we saw the animals entering the hall easily.
When we went to the slaughterhouse in order to see how the slaughtering acts were performed, we found that the animals which were being driven to be killed were coming submissively, as if they were yielding to the fate which Allah had created for them. They were surrendering themselves, and the blood was flowing out of them cleanly and in great amounts, so that it looked as if no blood would remain after pronouncing these words. They had to be dragged over which these words had not been said, chained to be slaughtered. Only a small amount of blood was released by them.
When pronouncing the name of Allah, the slaughter is performed with godliness, calm, and humanity. All the workers remember that the name of Allah prevails over everything. So, in this submissive atmosphere, the carcass is affected as little as possible in losing its soul. Consequently, the quality of the muscles made ready for eating are completely undamaged, and the amount of the bleeding is so plentiful that the amount of germs is minimal. Therefore, the food for these carcasses relieves a great deal of anxiety from the consumer. In my opinion, the studies performed by the medical team on the effect of pronouncing the name of Allah on a carcass has proved that this meat is completely free of microbes and resulting quality is very high.
It was proved that the negligence of pronouncing the name of Allah over a carcass made its meat a focus of blood filled with microbes. So what is the opinion of doctors and specialists about the presence of this blood and these microbes within the tissue of the meat? What is the extent of their effect on public health?
عندما كنت في الخارج أثناء سنين دراستي رأيت بأم عيني كيف يتماثل.
During the years of my studies abroad, I noticed how the patients really improved when they stopped eating meat. The main reason I gave for this was that this meat was not slaughtered according to Islamic custom. In other words, it had been slaughtered in another fashion. And after revealing the great importance of pronouncing the words Allah is greater over a carcass, in preventing blood from remaining in the animal and the consequent growth of microbes, it has become clear